Emma Thompson lived a modest life, but her heart was anything but small. At 28, she worked long hours as a waitress at a cozy diner tucked into the corner of a bustling city street. The tips were meager, and the work was exhausting, but Emma found joy in the little things. Sharing laughter with regular customers, sneaking extra slices of pie onto plates, or helping an elderly patron carry groceries to their car. Her compassion wasn't limited to the diner. On weekends, she volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals and listening to stories from people who had fallen on hard times. Though her own paycheck barely stretched to cover rent and groceries, Emma always managed to find ways to give back. "It's not about how much you have," her grandmother used to say. "It's about what you do with it." One bitterly cold winter evening, as Emma clocked out after a grueling shift, the icy wind bit through her thin coat. Snowflakes swirled around lampposts, casting faint halos of light onto the deserted streets. As she walked home, her breath visible in frosty puffs, something caught her eye: a figure huddled under the shadow of a nearby bridge. Approaching cautiously, Emma saw a frail man wrapped in tattered blankets, his shoulders shaking violently against the chill. His face was gaunt, his hands raw and chapped from the cold. A pang of empathy struck her chest. She couldn't just walk away. Without hesitation, Emma turned back toward the diner. Inside, she ordered a steaming bowl of soup and a hot sandwich, using the last few dollars in her pocket. Then, removing her scarf, she approached the man again. "Here," she said softly, holding out the food and scarf. "You look like you could use this more than I can." The man glanced up, startled, before accepting her offerings with trembling hands. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough but sincere. In that moment, Emma didn't know it, but her simple act of kindness would set off a chain reaction neither of them could have anticipated. Little did she realize, the man she'd helped wasn't just another struggling soul. He was someone who once owned half the city. The man under the bridge introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, though his tone was guarded, almost hesitant. Emma sat beside him on the cold pavement, ignoring the snowflakes settling on her hair and shoulders. She didn't want to intrude, but something about his demeanor, a quiet sadness in his eyes, made her stay. "You don't have to sit here with me," Mr. Harrison said after a moment, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I'm not much company these days." Emma smiled warmly, brushing off his comment. "It's freezing out here. I'd rather keep you company than let you freeze alone." Her kindness seemed to soften him. Slowly, he began opening up, sharing fragments of his story. He spoke of a life that once felt full of wealth, success, and family, but had unraveled after a devastating tragedy. "I lost everything that mattered," he admitted, staring at the cracked concrete beneath them. "And when it all fell apart, I couldn't face rebuilding. So I left. This," he gestured vaguely at his tattered clothes and makeshift bed. "This is what's left." Emma listened intently, her heart breaking for the man before her. Though she couldn't fully grasp the depth of his pain, she understood loss well enough to empathize. Her own father had passed away when she was young, leaving her mother to raise her alone. Life hadn't been easy, but they'd found strength in each other, and in helping others. "I'm sorry for what you've been through," Emma said gently. "But maybe starting small could help? Like tonight, you accepted my scarf and this meal. That's one step forward, right?" Mr. Harrison studied her, his gaze sharp yet softened by gratitude. "Most people wouldn't give someone like me a second glance," he murmured. "You're different, Emma." She shrugged modestly, embarrassed by his praise. "I just try to do what's right. Besides, everyone deserves kindness, no matter where they are in life." Their conversation stretched on, interrupted only by the occasional rumble of distant traffic. Emma told him about her job at the diner, her volunteer work at the shelter, and her dream of someday opening a community center to help those in need. Mr. Harrison listened quietly, nodding occasionally, as if rediscovering a part of humanity he'd long forgotten. When the food was finished and the temperature dropped even further, Emma reluctantly stood to leave. "Take care of yourself, okay?" she said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "If you ever need anything, food, clothes, whatever, I'll be around." Mr. Harrison nodded, his expression unreadable. As Emma walked away, she glanced back once and saw him clutching her scarf tightly, as if holding on to more than just warmth. The next evening, driven by concern, Emma returned to the bridge with another meal and a pair of thick gloves she'd bought using spare change from her tips. But to her dismay, Mr. Harrison was gone. There was no sign of him, no blankets, no trace of their brief connection. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. Had he moved on? Was he safe? Little did Emma know, her act of kindness had already set something extraordinary in motion. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Harrison wasn't just any homeless man. He was a billionaire who had walked away from his fortune years ago, and now, inspired by her selflessness, he was ready to reclaim a piece of his former life. Not for himself, but to honor the woman who reminded him of humanity's goodness. Weeks passed, and Emma couldn't shake the memory of Mr. Harrison. She often found herself glancing toward the bridge during her walks home, half expecting to see him huddled there again. But he never reappeared. Though she tried not to dwell on it, a part of her wondered if he was safe, if he'd found shelter or someone else to help him. One chilly morning, as Emma served coffee to a group of construction workers at the diner, the bell above the door jingled. A sharply dressed man entered, his polished shoes clicking against the tiled floor. He approached the counter, holding out an envelope with Emma's name written neatly on the front. "This is for you," he said, his tone formal yet warm. "It's from a client who wishes to remain anonymous." Emma frowned, confused. "For me? Are you sure this isn't a mistake?" The man smiled faintly. "No mistake. Just read it when you have a moment." Tucking the envelope into her apron pocket, Emma dismissed it as some sort of promotional material or perhaps a misplaced letter. But later that evening, curiosity got the better of her. Sitting alone in her small apartment, she carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Her breath caught as she scanned the contents. It was an invitation to meet with a lawyer regarding an urgent matter involving an anonymous benefactor. The letter was brief but formal, urging her to attend the meeting scheduled for the following week. Panic fluttered in her chest. What could this possibly be about? When the day arrived, Emma nervously made her way to the address listed, a sleek downtown office building that housed one of the city's most prestigious law firms. The receptionist greeted her warmly and led her to a conference room where a middle-aged lawyer named Mr. Caldwell awaited. "Thank you for coming, Miss Thompson," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "I'll get straight to the point. You recently assisted a man named Mr. Harrison. Do you recall him?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I helped him one night. He was homeless, living under a bridge." "Why, is he okay?" Mr. Caldwell nodded, his expression softening. "He's fine, or as well as can be expected. Before I explain further, let me share a bit about Mr. Harrison. He's not just any ordinary man. He's a billionaire who walked away from his fortune years ago after a personal tragedy. For reasons known only to him, he chose to live among those less fortunate." Emma stared at him, stunned. "A billionaire? That doesn't make sense. He had nothing." "He gave it all up," Mr. Caldwell clarified. "But recently he decided to reclaim a portion of his assets. Not for himself, but to honor someone who reminded him of humanity's goodness. Someone like you." Reaching into his briefcase, Mr. Caldwell pulled out a stack of documents. "Mr. Harrison has left you half of his fortune, a gift of gratitude for your kindness that night. He believes your act of compassion reignited his faith in people." Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the papers. Half of his fortune? That's insane. "I didn't do anything special. I just gave him food and a scarf." "You did more than you realize," Mr. Caldwell replied gently. To him, your actions meant everything. Enclosed with the legal documents was a handwritten note from Mr. Harrison himself. Emma unfolded it with shaking hands and read, "Dear Emma, I've spent years hiding from the world, convinced that humanity had lost its way. But then you came along, with your warmth, your generosity, and your refusal to look away. You reminded me that even in our darkest moments, light exists if we choose to see it. This gift is my way of saying thank you, not just for helping me, but for inspiring me to believe in others again. Use it wisely, as I know you will. With gratitude, Mr. Harrison. Tears blurred Emma's vision as she clutched the note to her chest. She had no idea her small act of kindness had such a profound impact, not only on Mr. Harrison but now on her own life as well. As she left the office, the weight of the revelation settled over her. This wasn't just money. It was a responsibility, a chance to create ripples of change far beyond what she'd imagined. Little did Emma know, this was only the beginning of her journey. For days after the meeting with Mr. Caldwell, Emma struggled to process the magnitude of what had happened. Half of a billionaire's fortune, enough to change her life and countless others forever, was now hers. But instead of excitement, she felt overwhelmed. Who was she to deserve such generosity? How could she possibly live up to the trust Mr. Harrison had placed in her? At first, guilt gnawed at her. She thought about returning the money, dismissing it as something she hadn't earned. But as she reread Mr. Harrison's note, his words resonated deeply. Use it wisely, as I know you will. This wasn't just a gift. It was an opportunity, a chance to amplify the kindness he'd recognized in her. Determined to honor his faith, Emma began crafting a plan. She pored over community needs, identifying gaps where her resources could make the biggest impact. Her dream of opening a community center became her first priority. Within months, she purchased a large building in a struggling neighborhood, transforming it into a vibrant hub of hope and support. The center offered free meals, job training programs, childcare services, and educational workshops, all funded by Emma's inheritance. But Emma didn't stop there. Remembering the biting cold that had driven her to help Mr. Harrison, she spearheaded the construction of a state-of-the-art homeless shelter equipped with warm beds, medical care, and counseling services. She named it Harrison's Haven, dedicating it to the man who had unknowingly changed her life. Despite her newfound wealth, Emma refused to let it alter who she was. She continued working shifts at the diner, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of serving coffee and chatting with regulars. To her, staying grounded was essential. It reminded her of where she came from and kept her connected to the people she aimed to serve. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison embarked on his own journey of redemption. Inspired by Emma's selflessness, he reached out to his estranged family, reconnecting with a daughter he hadn't spoken to in years. Together, they began managing his remaining assets, channeling funds into philanthropic projects focused on education, healthcare, and affordable housing. Though he never sought recognition, whispers of his return to public life began circulating, painting him as a reclusive benefactor determined to right past wrongs. One evening, as Emma stood in the newly opened community center, watching children laugh and families gather for dinner, she reflected on how far she'd come. What started as a simple act of compassion had grown into something extraordinary, a movement fueled by gratitude and generosity. Still, questions lingered in her mind. Where was Mr. Harrison now? Was he safe? Had her kindness truly made a difference in his life? These thoughts stayed with her until fate intervened once more. Months later, Emma received an invitation to a charity gala hosted by one of her organizations. As she mingled among donors and volunteers, a familiar figure caught her eye across the room. It was Mr. Harrison, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his once frail frame now robust and confident. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Approaching her cautiously, Mr. Harrison extended a hand. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's good to see you again." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she shook his hand. "I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again," she admitted. "Are you doing okay?" He nodded, smiling faintly. "Better than I have in years. Thanks to you." They spent the rest of the evening catching up, sharing stories of how their lives had transformed since that fateful night under the bridge. Both realized they had reignited each other's faith in humanity and in themselves. By the end of the night, Emma knew one thing for certain. Kindness wasn't just an act. It was a cycle, endlessly giving and receiving, touching lives in ways no one could predict. In the years that followed, Emma became a beacon of hope in her community. Her tireless efforts to uplift others earned her widespread admiration, though she remained humble, always deflecting praise onto those who inspired her, like Mr. Harrison. The ripple effects of her work spread far beyond what she could have imagined. Families found stability through job training programs, children pursued education thanks to scholarships funded by Harrison's Haven, and countless lives were transformed by access to shelter and healthcare. Emma also stayed deeply involved with the diner where she'd worked for so many years. Though she no longer needed the income, she cherished the connection it gave her to everyday people, the kind of people she aimed to help. Regulars often joked that she was the richest waitress in town. But to them, she was simply Emma. Kind, down-to-earth, and always ready with a warm smile. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison continued his quiet philanthropy, working alongside his daughter to rebuild not only his legacy, but also his relationships. Together, they launched initiatives focused on affordable housing and mental health support, ensuring their resources reached those most in need. Though he rarely attended public events, rumors of his generosity sparked a wave of goodwill, inspiring others to contribute to causes close to their hearts. One summer afternoon, Emma stood on the bridge where she'd first met Mr. Harrison, a place now adorned with plaques commemorating her work and the countless lives touched by Harrison's Haven. As she gazed at the city skyline, she reflected on how one small act of kindness had set everything in motion. "You've done incredible things," came a familiar voice behind her. Turning, she saw Mr. Harrison approaching, his steps steady and confident. Over time, he'd regained not just his health but also his sense of purpose. "So have you," Emma replied warmly. "You didn't just change my life. You reminded me how powerful compassion can be." They shared a quiet moment, watching the river flow beneath them. Both knew their paths crossing that winter night had been more than coincidence. It was a reminder that everyone carries unseen stories, and even the smallest gestures can spark monumental change. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the city, Emma smiled softly. She thought about all the lives they'd touched together and realized their legacies would endure long after they were gone. "Thank you," Mr. Harrison said finally, breaking the silence, "for reminding me there's still good in this world." "And thank you," Emma responded, her voice steady with gratitude, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Together, they walked away from the bridge, knowing their journey wasn't just about giving. It was about inspiring others to do the same. In doing so, they ensured that kindness would continue to ripple outward, touching hearts and changing lives for generations to come. Emma often thought about the chain reaction sparked by her simple act of kindness that cold winter night. Helping Mr. Harrison had been instinctive, a moment of empathy she hadn't given much thought to at the time. Yet, it had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have foreseen. The city itself seemed different now, brighter, more connected. Shelters were no longer overcrowded, children attended school with dreams of brighter futures, and families found stability through programs Emma and Mr. Harrison had created. Their partnership proved that even those who felt broken could rebuild not only their own lives but also the lives of others. As Emma stood once more on the bridge where it all began, she realized the true power of compassion. It wasn't about grand gestures or vast fortunes. It was about seeing someone, truly seeing them, and choosing to care. Whether it was a scarf offered to a shivering stranger or half a fortune gifted to a waitress, every act of kindness carried the potential to change the world. Mr. Harrison's final words echoed in her mind. "There's still good in this world. And because of people like Emma and Mr. Harrison, there always would be." Years later, when asked about her legacy, Emma simply smiled. "It's not mine," she'd say. "It belongs to everyone who chooses to give, to help, to hope."